Hey everybody, it's Chris. This week, the movie Logan is opening, and I thought, you know what, that's the perfect time to take a look at the storyline Old Man Logan that ran in Volume 3 of Wolverine. It was by artist Steve McNiven and writer Mark Millar. So that's whose tropes we're going to be looking at today, Mark Millar. It's one I've wanted to cover for a while, and if there's one hallmark of Mark Millar, it's cynicism. But before 20th Century Fox decided to adapt Old Man Logan, they had some other ideas. For instance, there was Teen Wolverine, there was the musical Wah Wah Wolverine, and they even thought of going the animated route, teaming up with Disney for Finding Nemo and also Wolverine. But ultimately they decided to adapt Old Man Logan, which was a very popular storyline. It's set in an alternate future, 50 years in the future from the comic books. It's pretty bleak stuff. Now, the storyline ran from issue 66 for 7 issues, and then there was a 8th special oversized edition to wrap the story up. I don't want to spoil the whole thing for you in case you're interested in reading it yourself and you haven't yet, or maybe you're worried that there's elements from the comic that will be in the movie. So what I'm going to do is review issue number 68. That's sort of the end of the first act. It's all still sort of set up, you could say. And I don't think that any of the stuff we're going over in it will really be used in the movie, because this is definitely set very firmly in the Marvel Comics universe. And 20th Century Fox simply doesn't have access to a lot of those elements. Anyway, before we go any further, let's quickly take a look at some of the tropes that you could find in any given issue of a Mark Millar comic book. They included a depressingly bleak world, characters exerting excessive revenge, adding moments of realism to contrast with the heightened reality, using Nazis as villains, having rape take place, stories implying or directly telling the reader that they're a bit of a loser, stories being cynical at best or mean-spirited at worst, creating obvious stand-ins for existing characters, lampshading or pointing out plot holes, possibly to apologize for having them in the story, using the phrase, "What are you talking about?" and then using that phrase a lot. All right, so as I said, we're going to look at issue number 68 of Wolverine Volume 3. Before we even get to page 1, we've sort of got a page 0 here with a few paragraphs explaining what's happened thus far, explaining this world to us, and even showing us a map. I'll explain. This story takes place 50 years in the future, as I said before. Now, if you've ever seen the movie Unforgiven with Clint Eastwood, yeah, this is basically Unforgiven. This preamble here on page 0 explains what's going on so far. And in the first few issues, we've learned that Wolverine now has a family. He's married. He's no longer a superhero. He only calls himself Logan. He's got a dark past, and he won't pop his claws, and he does not call himself Wolverine. He considers that basically a whole separate entity that's in his past. That's a lot like William Money, Clint Eastwood's character. He was a real bad guy before he got married and had kids, and he does not look back to his past at all. Both of them are farmers. Both of them are not only farmers, they're farmers with a failing farm and sick pigs. Unforgiven began with William Money trying to separate the hogs and falling in the mud. This issue begins with Wolverine can't pay his rent because no one will buy his sick pigs. It's really, really similar. Basically, if you look at this map, you'll see that the supervillains have taken over this world, and Wolverine lives in the Hulk's territory. Now, the Hulk is, of course, not a supervillain, right? Well, in this world, it says that Bruce Banner slowly went insane from his radiation. You just have to go with that. In the comics, the radiation gives him super strength and super healing. In this, it has somehow also basically affected his mind. He went bad. And all of the supervillains teamed up one day. They realized that by sheer number, they outnumber the superheroes. That makes sense. Every superhero has a rogues gallery. So they all teamed up and they took over apparently just America, because we never hear about the rest of the world. If you look at this map, that's America. Does that mean that Canada is still safe? Can people be having great lives in Japan or England? I don't know. It's literally never addressed whether the supervillains took over the entire world or what. That we only deal with America. That's because this story, to a degree, is sort of a Western and a road trip movie. But it would be interesting to have at least hints of what is going on outside of America, and we don't get that, unfortunately. So Wolverine is in serious debt to the Hulk's family. The Hulk, unfortunately, has an inbred family. He and She-Hulk have had tons of babies. That's right, he mated with his cousin. I don't know how that happened, because we're never told that She-Hulk went insane. We never get to see her in the story. I don't even want to think about that. But you know what? Before I go any further, I think you can understand that what we're describing here is a bleak world. So bleak. The supervillains have won. Wolverine is retired. He's in debt. Oh, this is sad. Just like in Unforgiven, Clint Eastwood teams up with Morgan Freeman, two older men going off on one last adventure together. This is about, and by the way, that's also to pay off a debt. This is Wolverine paying off a debt by teaming up with Hawkeye, who is now old and blind, and he needs to transport something across the country. Wolverine is so desperate for money, he agrees to do it, although he insists that he will not fight. He will not pop his claws. He will not get involved in any way. He's done being a superhero. So that's Wolverine's motivation. He just wants to make money. He wants to stay out of trouble. Looking at this map, we also see that the Kingpin has taken over part of America, and it looks like he took it over from Magneto. It's kind of weird that Kingpin and Magneto didn't get their own separate areas, but anyway, moving to the east, we also see that Doctor Doom has taken over a quarter of the country. Why does Doctor Doom want Minneapolis? Why would Doctor Doom settle for Minneapolis? That's pretty weird. We never encounter Doctor Doom, so I can't explain that one to you. And then there's a mystery as to who's controlling the East Coast and calling himself the president. That's revealed in the story. I won't get into it. I think it's worth noting that in this story, the supervillains have teamed up, they've swapped enemies, and they were successful. Why haven't they done this before? Well, actually, they did. There was a storyline that crossed over through basically all the Marvel titles back around the early 90s. I can't remember the exact year yet. It was called Acts of Vengeance, and I thought it was awesome. Basically, a mysterious figure brought together all the biggest villains. We're talking, Mandarin, Magneto, Kingpin, Red Skull. Ultimately, that bad guy was revealed to be Loki. So it was all the top villains, and then they got all their flunkies, and they swapped who they fought. They swapped, like, fighting different superheroes. And that was really exciting. I think what you realize ultimately is that the superheroes still triumphed. It was a tough time for them, but they still triumphed. It was a really fun story because you're seeing characters fight that have never even met before. It was a really cool idea. My personal favorite part of the story was the reveal that Magneto had really decided to join up with these people just for the opportunity to get revenge on Red Skull. Because, of course, Red Skull is a Nazi and Magneto is a survivor of the Auschwitz camps. I thought that was a really cool storyline. For some reason, Mark Millar uses that basically exact same idea, but this time the supervillains are successful. Now, they say that's because there are more of them. They overwhelm the heroes with sheer numbers. And that is true. However, in most comics, you'll notice that the supervillains are often in jail, or they're dead, or depowered. The hero defeats a villain, and then they're not just right back on the streets. There's usually some sort of storyline to them either escaping or getting their powers back. In this, there's just hundreds and hundreds of supervillains 50 years ago that all ganged up and basically killed just about all of the superheroes. As I said, very bleak. Let's move forward with the actual story. Logan and Hawkeye have made it from Sacramento, California, where they began this story, to Las Vegas. And they're stopping there for supplies, but also Hawkeye has what he calls his third ex-wife, Tanya. That's this lady here, and she is said to be the daughter of Spider-Man. Now, we never actually see or hear what happened to Peter Parker, so that's still a mystery. Tanya is in a relationship with Ultron 8, and I know you're thinking, well, Ultron, he's a supervillain, right? Typically, yeah, but in this, he's said to be a better adoptive father to Hawkeye's daughter, Ashley. Tanya is in a relationship with this robot. This Ultron 8 is Meek. They just work at an auto body garage. It's a pretty strange idea. I don't know who Tanya's mother is. That's never addressed. It's an interesting bit of world building. It's strange. But we also learned that Hawkeye's daughter, Ashley, has put on a Spider-Girl uniform and gone to face the Kingpin, and she's been kidnapped. So now we've got a detour. And of course, Wolverine doesn't want to be involved at all. It's kind of sad, actually, seeing like Hawkeye have this ex-wife that hates his guts and is in a relationship with a former supervillain. Wolverine doesn't want to get involved at all. It's a cynical view of the world. I think that that's fair. And it's an interesting bit of world building, but it is cynical. Logan says he wants no part of going on this side mission. That's not what he signed up for. But Hawkeye says, you know what, I'll pay you double if you just go along with me. And Wolverine says, sorry, I keep calling him Wolverine, but he insists that he's called Logan. Logan says, I'll take you, but I'm not going to get in a fight. And Hawkeye's like, yeah, fine. I just need somebody to use the map. By the way, as I said, Hawkeye is blind in this, but he insists on driving them. That's a pretty weird thing. I mean, I guess it's supposed to be funny. To me, it just seems very strange that Logan is like, yeah, okay, you drive. Before Logan and Hawkeye leave, Ultron tosses him a keychain, says that it's for good luck. It's an old X-Men keychain. Apparently the X-Men had merchandise, so who knew? Logan flashes back to something. We're not sure what. That's explained later. Basically, he has little flashbacks of what went wrong for him that 50 years ago that caused him to say, I'm not Wolverine anymore and I'm never going to pop my claws again. And if any of this stuff that we're reading so far seems bleak or cynical, wait until you see the reveal of how bad things went for Wolverine. It's crushingly depressing. Hawkeye insists that their diversion will not cost them too much time, so Logan will have time to get paid and pay his landlords. Logan says, look, we're both doing this for our kids. And they drive through a town that basically has fallen into a massive sinkhole. And the story there is that the Mole Man, a Fantastic Four villain, has died, so his minions, the Moloids, are now sort of crazy, and they go throughout America just sort of eating up the underground and having whole towns fall down into the ground where they're basically cannibals and they eat people. Hawkeye and Logan see this one man clinging to a church steeple begging for help, and they're like, yeah, we ain't got time for that. And they keep going. As I said, cynical. Oh my God, that's so close to mean-spirited that these two former superheroes are just like, oh yeah, sucks to be you, buddy. And they just keep going. Now we cut ahead to the seat of the Kingpin's power, and we see that Daredevil and Punisher have both survived. They're both still alive, but they've been captured. They're in an arena. They've obviously been beaten to hell, and just looking at Punisher, we can see that they're a lot older. And then we see the Kingpin. It is not Wilson Fisk. It is a new Kingpin, somebody new and younger. And he says that the reason he was able to usurp Magneto and take control of his area was that basically Magneto simply got old. And obviously that's a theme of this story, is aging and getting older. and becoming a different person. So that fits thematically. That's interesting. I still don't know how a regular human could beat even an old Magneto. I mean, he's one of the most powerful mutants ever. That's a story I'd kind of like to see. But whatever, we can buy it and we move on. But this new Kingpin releases dinosaurs from the Savage Land. Dinosaurs that just completely eviscerate Punisher and Daredevil. Wow, look at that. They don't even have a chance. These two guys were superheroes. They just get torn to shreds. Like I say, that feels cynical to me. We just keep hitting this because these guys don't even have a chance. They don't even really fight back. We never get to see them, heroically die. They're just sort of slaughtered as people cheer. It's kind of sad, I think. I think it's a little mean-spirited to these guys that we've seen win hundreds and hundreds of battles, all of a sudden get taken down so easily. The realism trope. I think that's being employed here. I think that a younger Kingpin being said to take out Magneto is a stab at trying to ground this world. I don't necessarily agree that it works. It's an interesting idea, but I do think it's Mark Millar trying to add that bit of realism. And some groundedness, I think, works with people's motivations and emotions in superhero stories. But when you try to employ real-world physics or something like that, things get wonky. Let me give an example. In The Ultimates, which is basically a new version of the Avengers, Mark Millar was writing that, and he had a guy named Nighthawk jump into battle. When he lands, this guy's basically a Batman analog, by the way, so that's another trope. When he lands, he just twists his ankle. He breaks it. Yeah, that's something that could happen, but it's just sort of weird. It just sort of, I feel, halts the story cold, and you're thinking all about like, oh yeah, why doesn't that happen more often? Another example is, Kick-Ass starts as this sort of realistic take with a teenager saying, why don't people try to be real-life superheroes? And at first, that seems fairly plausible. He puts on a suit, but he still gets his butt kicked a bunch. But then we meet Hit Girl, this teenage girl that is a complete ninja. And it's as over the top as any comic book ever. So that realism sort of goes out the window. While Punisher and Daredevil are getting slaughtered, Logan and Hawkeye are spying on them. Logan has some sort of infrared binoculars, some sort of future tech, and they're coming up with a plan as to how to break into the Kingpin's stronghold and rescue Ashley. They're noting how many bad guys there are, etc. Logan and Hawkeye's plan to get into this tower that Ashley is being held in, by the way, yeah, it's basically using the spider buggy. This is kind of fun. I like this. The spider buggy was something that Spider-Man had back in the 70s for like one issue. His friend, the Human Torch, built it, tried to get him some sort of a sponsorship deal, I believe, and Spider-Man was like, well, why would I need a car? Especially in New York, but why would I need a car? I've got webs. But this car was kind of cool in that it was able to stick to walls. Its tires could go straight up buildings and stuff like that. As I said, it was only used at the time for like one sort of gag. But other writers have come back and said, no, the spider buggy's kind of cool. Dan Slott has currently been using Spider-Man and said that Peter Parker is now like a wealthy billionaire a la Tony Stark. He's a scientist, he's created a company, it's successful, and he's created a new version of the spider buggy among other vehicles and gadgets. It's kind of fun. But in this, these guys are basically just racing the car along a building, planning to jump into the next building and rescue Ashley. That's a fun use of a bit of Marvel history. I will say that Mark Millar, in his stories, does not contradict other people's stories. He's very good about respecting continuity. He really, really is. He will weld in former stories and former, like things that have come in passing. He just considers that canon, that happened. He might make fun of it, he may use it in a different way, but he does respect that it happened. He never contradicts that stuff. He's really good at that. So the spider buggy crashes through the walls. Hawkeye jumps out and he's got a sword and he just goes to town on these guys, even though he's blind. Apparently he's sort of a ninja master right now. Fair enough, I guess we can buy that. You know what, if Daredevil can use heightened senses, Frank Millar's story, by the way, that's Frank Miller, not Millar, no relation. Frank Millar's storyline with Daredevil retconned that Stick, his mentor, taught him how to use heightened senses when he was blind. As in, it wasn't necessarily that radioactive isotope that gave Daredevil his powers. It could be that anybody that trains properly could use heightened senses. And I think that's sort of what's going on here, is that Hawkeye just listens and he knows where people are and he takes them out. It's very violent. But you know what? I do think that Steve McNiven's art is pretty exciting. It's clean. I like it overall. I think it's pretty cool. It is dark. This is dark, seeing Hawkeye kill people when 50 years ago Hawkeye would never kill. Hawkeye was big into never killing, always believing there's an alternate way to go about things. In this, he's killing, but 50 years have passed, supervillains have taken over. I think we can buy it. His daughter Ashley says, I'm over here, and the control panel is like 30 feet to my left. Hawkeye fires his bow and arrow and deactivates it. Ashley comes out, Spider-Girl, I think you could call her, because she's wearing a version of the Spider-Girl costume. Just as Kingpin goes, hey, what's going on here? And she decapitates him. She just punches him with a shotgun, and it takes his head clean off. Very violent. Like I say, it's cynical. Like, the extreme violence on display here, it's a bit much, I think. It's exciting, but it's also kind of, is it necessary? It's intentionally over the top, so I guess you know what you're getting. To me, I do feel like this is a little forced. So Hawkeye's like, what are you doing? She knocks out her old man and she's like, yeah, I'm not trying to be the next Spider-Man or anything. I came here to take over the Kingpin's empire. He got old and I'm taking over. That's my whole plan. And she's about to kill Hawkeye. We cut to Logan. He's still behind the wheel of the spider buggy. He says, damn you to hell for making me do this, Hawkeye. Implying that he's basically going to get involved in the fight finally. Extreme revenge. Wow. Taking the Kingpin's head clean off like that, but that is definitely a trope of Mark Millar's work. If you ever read Red Sun, that's a fantastic comic. That's an alternate take on Superman where supposedly Clark Kent landed in Russia and was raised to be a Russian superhero. In that story, Lex Luthor lost a chess match to a clone of Superman, Bizarro, you'd say, and he's so angry about losing a chess match that he becomes a supervillain and makes it his whole mission to kill Superman, who the clone was made from. It's so ridiculous. And that's just one example. People take extreme revenge in his stories, and I think Ashley taking off Kingpin's head is definitely an example of that. Wolverine smoked cigars, didn't he? Well, 4 tropes, 4 cigars. Let's see how this goes. Oh, wow. Oh, this is intense. It's awful. So that was this particular issue, and I know I only came across 4 tropes here, but I think that you get a sense of how the tropes are very much ingrained and repeated. It's very cynical. It's very Bleak World. That's definitely part and parcel with any Mark Millar story. I don't think that the movie will be too close of an adaptation to this, actually. I think that the only thing they'll really be taking is the idea of it sort of being vaguely Western, the idea that there's maybe no more superheroes, and of course the idea that Logan is now old and refuses to fight. But his motivations could be different. I think his mission will be different. This storyline, Old Man Logan, is very, very firmly placed in the Marvel Universe. We've got Hawkeye as, the co-star. We've got, we saw mentions of Spider-Man, Ultron, all sorts of things like that. Daredevil and Punisher. In the story, there's Moloids, there's the Venom symbiote, there's dinosaurs from the Savage Land. A lot of these things 20th Century Fox has no rights to. You know, they can't use Kingpin. They can't use any of this stuff. So the storyline for the movie is going to be pretty different, I think. It's just going to have an old Wolverine. And that's fine, that's fine. Overall, this story is very bleak. At the same time, I did find it kind of interesting. I feel like it has a very, very sad ending that I'm not 100% sure is justified. In fact, it sort of almost has two sad endings. You know how I said this was similar to the movie Unforgiven? And in Unforgiven, Morgan Freeman dies. Spoiler for a pretty old movie at this point. Something similar happens to Logan in this, but then it sort of happens again. He loses someone, and then he loses someone again. It's almost like it has two endings, and they're both pretty depressing. That said, it does end with him sort of walking off into the sunset with a baby Hulk. And the reason that's interesting is this was not actually the first appearance of Old Man Logan in the storyline Old Man Logan. Mark Millar had him appear in Fantastic Four just a month or two before this. Much older. He was called the Hooded Man in that. It was a time travel story. And an even older Wolverine came back in time with Bruce Banner Jr., basically a grown-up Hulk that was actually the son of the Hulk. And this version of Wolverine had started a new superhero team in a bleak future. So basically, Mark Millar had this idea, I think, all at once. He was like, you know, I have this idea for a really dark future that Wolverine is a very important character for, and he used it in two stories at the same time. It was Fantastic Four and Wolverine. Both featured versions of this character. But technically, he did show up in Fantastic Four first. Anyway, so it's a loose adaptation for the movie. I think that it was kind of fun. I do think it's kind of dark. But I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about Mark Millar. Are you fans of his runs on things like The Authority and The Ultimates? Do you like his creator-owned work like Nemesis and Wanted and Chosen? Or do you agree with me that maybe he reuses certain things, certainly like stuff like rape and Nazis show up in a lot of his books. It's pretty dark stuff, in my opinion. That said, among his work, Old Man Logan ranks towards the top for me. I did find it pretty interesting. Anyway, that's it for this week. Next week, I think I will be covering a manga, a Japanese manga. Maybe you can guess what it is. Until then, keep reading comics.